exploded into existence. Beautiful. Beyond compare.
What's going on, everyone? It's Sam. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be diving into the brand new world that Eternals has opened up to us, which is the deep cosmos and in general the cosmic lore and origins of the universe. With the introduction of the Eternals race, Celestials, and all that Eros the Judge spoke about in the film, you can argue it creates more questions than actual answers. For example, how powerful are the Celestials? Where does Kang fall in this hierarchy of MCU power? And in general, is Eros lying? So if you like Marvel, the MCU, comics, and everything in between, subscribe to the channel. But other than that, let's get into the video. Let's go. At first, I thought the Celestials made Kang feel like an ant, and even coming out of the film for the first time, my thoughts were, we just went from 95% Earth-based events to Kang's introduction to now Celestials who have so-called created the universe. But after thinking about it, the origins of the universe is partially a lie, and Erosham's explanation of the universe in general doesn't really line up with Wong's from Infinity War. If we look at general science, the Big Bang was the beginning of the universe. All that was there was energy until a huge explosion occurred. There was no life, no suns, no Celestials, no Kang, nothing. The Big Bang created Infinity Stones and eventually life. This is pretty on par with what Wong was talking about, which nullifies anything that Erosham spoke about in Eternals. And looking into the comics, you have beings like Eternity, the Living Tribunal, the One Above All. They are all above the levels of Celestials. In fact, the Living Tribunal, whose job is to keep the multiverse in a power balance, and whose statue we see in the Void during Loki, his only superior is the One Above All, who is said to be the creator of all life in the multiverse. Some people even like to refer to that person as the comic writers, but in the comics he is essentially a being or entity. The Celestials were created by the first Firmament, who is nearly on par with Eternity. This being is an abstract manifestation of the first universe to ever exist, and over time the Celestials would eventually rebel against, so that they had free reign and could create life on their own. The reason why I mention this is because, like any beings, the Celestials have their own plans, and that plan is to expand their race among the stars and universes to be the most powerful. In the MCU, we don't know anything beyond the Celestials, but odds are there is something above them who created them, like the first Firmament. Now, whether it's the same in the MCU or not, if I had to guess, Eternity or whoever this godlike being will likely be more of an amalgamation of a few characters or powers, just like how Kang and He Who Remains were morphed together in the MCU. Now, what helps Erosham sound so convincing in the Eternals movie is because he is the actual creator of them, and because of his grand power and strength, everything seems believable. But I would assume that this all changes in the sequel. The Celestial goal is to birth a new Celestial every so million or billions of years, which, although results in the destruction of one planet, gives life to so many others, so they claim. It is basically the Mandalorian way for Celestials.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
We might even see a retcon for why Thanos wanted to snap. They wanted to eradicate all of life except for themselves. Is it possible that Thanos learned of the Eternals' fates through his brother Eros? Was he aware of Celestials and their emergences? Was Titan a part of one of these? The MCU has done this plenty of times before, where they go back and kind of re-explain history to make it fit in with the new themes added. And if Titan was a part of another emergence, just like how Ajax was the Prime Eternal for Earth, it's likely that Alars, Thanos' father, was the Prime Eternal for Titan. And in the end, their mission didn't end because of a lack of resources, but rather because a Celestial killed everyone, similar to the scene in Guardians, or it could have just been a failed emergence. The snap would have not necessarily solved the problem, but it would have brought millions of planets around the universe time, because as we learn, Celestials feed off power that life gives planets. And a side note to think about, Alars being the Prime Eternal of Titan likely transferred his Celestial communicator orb to his less violent and non-deviant son Eros, which is why Eros could still have it in the present day, which of course we know that Eternals are under them in power, at least for now, but I digress. We can't forget about Galactus, who, like Cersei talks about in the movie, may be an apex predator or possibly the apex predator of the MCU eventually. Individually, Galactus is stronger than practically every Celestial, besides possibly in the comics the dreaming Celestial Tiamat, who, yes, is the Celestial on Earth that they were trying to stop during the emergence. I have a full video on this topic coming out in a few days and how this kind of plays into the next big threat being Galactus, so make sure you have the notification bell on to see this. The real reason I spoke about all these beings and entities, though, ties back to my first thought coming out of the movie: where does Kang fit into all of this? And I'm here to argue that Kang, or He Who Remains, in a way, is possibly more powerful than the Celestials because of one reason. He knows all and sees all, something Celestials cannot do. When someone asks you what makes a god, it's usually the same answer in science, philosophy, or religion. God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-good. All good of course gets tricky depending on how you look at it, but this exact description describes He Who Remains. He knows all because he controls time or the timeline, he is all powerful because he can strip away what makes free will real, and he is essentially all good because, like he says, without him, everything burns. Kang is a god in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He might not be able to create a sun or life, but he is all powerful, and there's one reason for this. As we saw in Loki, he is literally the last person alive at the end of the universe, meaning no Celestial is alive either. So therefore, at some point or in the end of the main MCU or sacred timeline like he refers to, Arishem and all the Celestials would have had to have died. Kang might not have as much raw power as the Celestials, but he might be more of a threat than the Celestials. With the emergence done with, Arishem mentions judgment, but other than that, they are worth nothing to him, whereas Kang needs to articulate his powers and plans through Earth. He is the last person to remain in the universe at the edge of time, and if Arishem is lying like we assume, it's most likely that eternity created everyone or everything. The question now is, where is he at the very end? Or will he not interfere, and how far will we go in the MCU to see this? Celestials were a huge leap in the cosmic hierarchy of power, but in the end, will we see the one above all? Although Eternals wasn't grounded at all, Eternals 2 is really going to dive into the cosmic side of the MCU, and potentially for a good portion of it off Earth. Hopefully a look into the World Forge, Arishem's plans, and a deeper look into the origins of the universe, and eventually our cosmic hierarchy of power will be shown in full. I think we'll meet the creators of the Celestials, or at the very least, the Living Tribunal. Now in the comics, you have to remember the Living Tribunal at one point didn't even allow for Warlock to wield the gauntlet, and I'm sure he'll want to keep Arishem in check as well. Eros also looks oddly common based on his character. We know he's a manipulator who maybe is working with Arishem, but what if his orb isn't connected to Arishem but someone else? A Celestial who doesn't agree with Arishem's plans, one who wants to take him down. Or does Eros know of the Living Tribunal and where Arishem is headed to meet him? This movie has given us a ton of questions to answer, but as it stands right now, we're presumed to believe that Celestials are the most powerful beings, and rightfully so, but you can argue that Kang has just as much power in his own way by being able to control time and making everything end with him on top. You can almost assume that there's someone larger than the Celestials, and they're coming soon. So let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below, and do you agree with this cosmic hierarchy of power? Is Kang more powerful? Is he not? Drop a like if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel because I have more Eternals videos coming out, and Disney Plus Day is on Friday, so get ready for announcements, trailers, and clips. Other than that, I just want to say thank you. I'm another Marvel guy, and I'll catch y'all on a blip.